So in making these insurance videos, I get a lot of the same questions. So let's talk about it.
You in the past, I'm in the future. You mad, they don't salute you. I need a bag.
Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here, my name is Keela Trishan, and I make videos on lifestyle, insurance, and mental health. I also do vlogs, day in life in the insurance industry, day in life with a toddler, all the things. So if that's something that interests you, go on ahead and click that subscribe button below. Be sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything from me. And if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back, and thank you for your support. Okay, so I get a lot of questions sometimes on these videos, and a lot of them are recurring. So I usually will just kind of answer them in the comments. If I get a DM on Instagram, I'll answer them, but I kind of figured, why not do a frequently asked questions video so I could just kind of spread the information to the masses. So if you have thought about some of these things and have not asked me or whatever, I can kind of answer those questions for you here. Now, I put together, how many do I have? I have like 9 questions, whatever, like 9 frequently asked questions. But if there are some questions that are not included here that you want to know, feel free to say that in the comments. You can leave the question, and depending on how many questions I get, I may just do a separate video, or I may just answer in the comments. Either way, I'll respond. But yeah, so if you are just kind of interested about the insurance industry, being an adjuster, kind of how it worked into your life, if you're a parent, all that good stuff, definitely go on ahead and stay tuned, and I might have some of those answers for you here today. Okay, so one of the main questions that I get asked about like being an adjuster and working in insurance is the adjuster role flexible? So for me, it kind of depends on your definition of flexible. Like, are you talking about flexible as in like the hours, flexible as in the time off? Like, what do you mean exactly? So I'll just kind of answer this question in the best way that I know how. For me, flexible means like kind of having autonomy over the schedule. So what I can say is that when I worked in an actual office, I didn't really have a lot of flexibility over my schedule, but I had flexibility over my workload. So as I've told you guys before, the way the workload is set up is you kind of schedule your diaries for when you're going to address something. The ideal adjuster is going to address things as soon as possible, as soon as they, get them in. Obviously that can change depending on like your workload, like what you actually have going on and what you have coming in. So what I'll say is, I think no matter what adjuster role you do, the workload part will be flexible as long as you're staying on top of like fires and staying on top of things that have deadlines. You usually won't have any issues with your manager. The most flexibility I've seen as far as my schedule has been with being a field adjuster. And the reason why that is because I'm not tied to an office. I work from home technically, but I go into the field when I have an inspection. So I've done this job twice, for those of you that don't know. So when I did it the first time, I was an hourly employee. So I did have flexibility over when I went out, but I still had to be cognizant of taking my lunch breaks by the 5th hour, because I live in California, so that's kind of the thing. Taking my lunch breaks by the 5th hour, and then I had to get overtime approved if, we were doing overtime. And this role that I'm currently in is salary, so I don't really have like a set start time or a set end time. I have my hours set, so like for customers, my hours are set from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. So if I'm logging in before 8 a.m. to work on things, to just kind of get my day started, I'm typically not answering my phone because that's not my working hours. And then if it's after 4:30, same thing, I'm not answering my phone because I'm essentially online to do more work. And then also like there's no set lunch breaks, or like if I need to, stop and go do something, I can do that within reason. So I guess to answer that question, there is flexibility depending on the type of adjuster you are. I would say if you're looking for like flexibility as far as schedule, the field adjuster role would probably be good for you. But it's hard to do that if you don't have experience. So you usually have to start as like a desk adjuster and then eventually work your way up to field adjuster. So yes and no, there's flexibility depending on your role in the industry. Okay, so the second question that I feel like I get asked a lot is the role hard, like being an adjuster? So my answer to that is it kind of depends on what you consider hard. So in my experience, the hardest part is when you first start, because it's so much information. There are a lot of guidelines that you have to follow. You have time sensitive situations. You've got the policy that you need to learn how to interpret. And when you get started, it's so much coming at you and people needing answers on the spot. You know, you may make a mistake and then your manager's like, why'd you do this? And all that stuff. So it is very hard in the beginning just to kind of understand what you're doing, what you have the power to do, what you have to go ask for approval on, things like that. So in short, it is a hard role. I think that after you understand what you're doing and you are like kind of seasoned and you're comfortable in making your decisions, the hard part is going to be staying on top of your workload. And this is going to be for new employees and for seasoned employees. If you watch my last video, which I will link here somewhere, but I did like 2 days in the life as a field adjuster, and I was ranting. I was talking plenty of shit because although I know what I'm doing, I feel like I have good techniques. I'm able to handle most situations without like manager involvement. The issue that I'm having right now is just the amount of work being thrown at me. So what is hard is trying to stay on top of that workload and not have things escalate while trying to still take care of myself, still take care of my family, all that stuff. So I am in a situation where we're just being overloaded with work and it's hard to kind of stay afloat. So you have to be, I would say this, it is a hard job and it's not for everybody. I'll say that all day, every day. Like, although in an ideal situation, I do enjoy what I do, I could also understand somebody saying like, F this, like this is not for me. Cause I have absolutely felt like that over the years, like in more ways than one. And I'm kind of there right now thinking that I need to, or knowing that I need to like kind of transition out of the like claims adjuster role into like more of like a back office type role where I'm not customer facing. I've talked about this, and again, I will link videos so you guys can kind of know why I feel that way, but it can be difficult. I find too that being an adjuster, you are constantly trying to make your managers happy and make the company look good, and look good in a sense like where, you know, you're representing the company well and just kind of, you know, following the policy. And then you're also in a position where you're trying to help your customer and, you know, keep your customer service scores up. And sometimes those things just don't happen because the customer may want something that you just can't do. Your manager just may not be willing to budge on something or whatever. So you kind of have to find that balance. And again, it's not for everyone. So some people do this job and it doesn't mean that they are bad employees or anything like that. It's just the amount of focus that you need to be a successful adjuster can just be too much for some people to handle. I've said before, this job can like open up feelings of anxiety and depression that you maybe never knew you had. So you really have to have a thick skin. You have to be nice but direct. You have to just kind of like be able to stand your ground. It's a lot. Okay, so the job is hard. I would say the hardest is in the beginning. The next part is going to be like more time management, but then there's only so much time management you can have if your job is throwing you a shitload of assignments. So if you're thinking about coming to the industry, just kind of keep that in mind and know that every company is different. You might have a good experience at this company and maybe a bad experience at that company, but again, it's all relative and it just kind of depends on what you can handle and what you consider to be hard. So in short, yes, it's hard, but it's not impossible. Okay, so this next question, I tend to get a lot because I'm a field adjuster in the property department. So I work with homes. Like if you have a claim on your home and, you know, somebody needs to come out and inspect it, I am the woman that will come out and inspect it if I am in your area. So with that being said, I get asked, do I have to climb on roofs? Now, every company is different. When I first started, obviously I got roof training. So I got trained how to climb on a roof, how to open my ladder, the proper way to set it up, all that good stuff. Truth be told, I was scared to get on the roof and I was really hoping and praying that I didn't get a lot of roof claims because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this job effectively if I got to always get on the roof. Even with all the training that I've had, I technically don't know what I'm looking at, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've never been a contractor, so I don't know what the shit is, right? So most insurance companies do require you to get on certain types of roofs. So the last company I worked for, they wanted you to get on, it was a 1-story roof and it was, I think 3 composition shingle, I think that's what it's called. Basically just like a regular, like it's a material that you can kind of walk on. It's not like super fragile, like let's say a clay roof, tile, things like that. So if it was a roof like that and it was 1 story, then they would want you to get on it. If it was something higher than that, 2 stories or, you know, a crazy pitch, then they would want you to call out an actual roofer. Other companies they kind of have different guidelines. Like maybe it's okay for you to get on a 1-story roof, but you know, if it's over a certain pitch, then they don't want you to do it. So Most companies do give you the option of calling out a roofer, especially if you don't feel safe. That's like the biggest thing. If you don't feel safe, all you have to do is just kind of note your file and say, hey, I don't feel safe because of whatever the situation is, and you call out a roofer. In my position now, I do not climb roofs. Like, it's not really required of me. And to be real with you, if it ever became required of me, I probably would have to like exit stage left quickly. But it is kind of something that depends on the company. So likely if you were new into the field, they're going to show you how to do it, and you'll probably be required to do it like your first couple of claims. Also, depending on where you live, you may or may not get that many roof claims to begin with. I live in Southern California, so I haven't had to climb many because we rarely get roof claims unless it's after like a heavy rain. Whereas someplace like Texas, where you know you have hailstorms and stuff like that, those adjusters may be climbing roofs all the time. So it just kind of depends on where you live and what your company requires. So the answer to that question is yes and no. Basically, if you don't feel comfortable, you do have other options, but there are some companies that are going to require you to climb certain roofs. All right, so the next question that I get a lot is from my parents, my working parents, and it's basically like, is it possible to do this job and have your children with you? The answer to that is, as far as my experience, I'm gonna go ahead and say yes. Is it easy? Hell no. Is it doable? Yes. You can do anything if you're put in a situation. So I would say, now I only have one child and I have a toddler. So, I mean, he is a handful, but I know that there are parents out there with multiple toddlers or toddlers and a newborn or, you know, school-age children, whatever. So I think it just kind of depends on where you're at in your parenting journey. The easier it gets, like I will say that, you know, I was doing this job when my son was born, and the struggles that I had back then are different than the struggles that I have now. Back then, I was exclusively breastfeeding at one point, and it was hard trying to make sure that I had enough milk for him and all that stuff, to the point where I ended up having to supplement formula because I was gone a lot and wasn't able to just, you know, pull over and pump, you know, in a particular time frame. So sometimes I had to supplement formula in order to make sure that he had enough to eat. And then also, because he was so small, like I didn't want just anybody watching him. So a lot of times I had family members looking after him. You know, if I couldn't be like in the house, like while, you know, obviously I was working, I needed to go inspect. Or if I was working from home, sometimes I would still need somebody there just to, you know, take care of him while I was working, because it would have been close to impossible for me to get anything done, especially since I was an hourly employee back then. The second carrier that I worked for, which is actually when I started doing these day in the life vlogs, he had just turned 1. So he was like between like 1 and like close to 2 when I was doing that job. And in that particular position, I was stay at home completely, so I didn't have to like go out into the field or anything like that. So for me, that's when I figured out like the routines, like, okay, let me make sure that he is fed, and let me make sure that he is dry and changed. So I just had to be very strategic with like making sure that I took my breaks and my lunches. If it were just me, sometimes I would skip breaks. Like I would have to take a lunch because I was hourly, but as far as taking an actual break, a lot of times I would skip that and just try to push through my work. But having him there, I had to make sure that I was taking breaks just in case he needed to be changed, or, you know, just simply playing with him, take him on a quick walk, that kind of thing. So you will find what works for you. It is definitely a job where I think that you can have some flexibility, even more flexibility if you're a field adjuster, like where I'm now. Like I can take him to daycare. I can take him to, you know, once he gets to school, I can take him to school, pick him up from school and stuff like that. I can kind of plan my schedule around it because I'm salary. So it is something you can do, but don't expect to go into it and it's like really easy. Because again, everybody's situation is different. So my biggest advice is just to make sure that you have your routine, try to plan for as much as you can, but also understand that even if you plan to a T, things can go wrong, and that's okay. Every day is going to be different. You just figure out your rhythm and figure out what works for you and your babies. But at the end of the day, your babies are the most important, so just know that. And at the end of the day, if something's going to have to take a back seat, it's going to have to be the job. So, you know, do what you can. A lot of times people get their work done during nap time or, you know, during playtime or whatever. You'll figure out what works for you, but it is doable. All right, the next question that I get a lot is, how can you start in the industry with no experience? And to this I say, so there are a lot of companies that hire for like what's called like an adjuster trainee type position. So it's usually like, it's just basically teaching you how to be an adjuster. It's teaching you how to do the investigation, teaching you just kind of, you know, the laws and all that kind of stuff, the Department of Insurance regulations. all that good stuff. So there are ways to start. Most companies want to see some type of customer service background. So even if you're like just out of high school, or, and let me actually back up with that, because some places do require that you have a degree. Some places require that you have experience. So you kind of have to play it by ear, see what's being offered in your area. I can't really speak to that because I do have a degree. So I typically don't have that. Like, I don't worry about the issue of not having a degree, but I do know that there are companies that will hire you without a degree as long as you have some type of experience. So just kind of keep that in mind. It depends on where you live, and it depends on, the company and what their job description says. But even someone that's like fresh out of college and may not have any work experience, if you have something that you can kind of speak to as far as like helping the customers or working with a team, like those are things that you're going to want to play up. Someone actually emailed me not long ago just kind of asking about this, and I was just pretty much saying, like, you want to play up, like, if you had any like team awards, or if you had any, you worked in customer service, if you had any customer service awards, you want to play up like different conflict resolution situations that you've been in, things like that. Because being an adjuster is a lot of conflict resolution. It's a lot of, trying to please a customer in a not so good situation, because obviously if they are in contact with you, that means that something has happened in their life, which is not good typically. So yeah, it's possible to start with no experience. So again, my biggest thing is to just kind of look for those training positions. A lot of times it's going to be a little mild, because the idea is to train you on what they want you to do, train you on the type of adjuster they want you to be. So a lot of companies hire for that. I always say kind of like check Indeed, or check the insurance companies that kind of like hire near you. One thing I'll do is like the companies that like play commercials in my area. Like if I was looking, I would kind of look up those companies and see if they're hiring in SoCal, because I live in SoCal. There are certain times where like I've tried to apply for something and they don't hire adjusters in my area, so I just wouldn't be able to work for that insurance company. So yeah, things like that. Like just kind of look at where you live, and then look for like trainee type roles, entry level type roles. And that's kind of going to be the easiest way to get your foot in the door if you're looking to do the adjuster position. All right, so another question that I get is about money. How much can you make starting out? So this question is kind of tricky because I started in 2015, so things were a little bit different back then. Also, it depends where you live, because I would say, like, if I could give a range, I would say that starting out as an adjuster, you probably make anywhere from like 30 to 50K. I know that's a big range, but again, it really depends on where you live, and it depends on the insurance company. There are some insurance companies that will pay significantly more, and then there are some insurance companies that kind of start you on the low end. So the biggest thing really is just kind of figuring out, your budget, figuring out your expenses, and how much do you need to make to be comfortable. Also understand that it is a lot of work, so I do advocate, especially if you have some type of experience and you bring something to the table, I would advocate for trying to get on that higher end. You can use things like Indeed and like Glassdoor to get ideas of like ranges for different companies. That'll kind of tell you like what companies are known for like paying a little more, what companies are known for paying a little bit less. And then I know for some people it's not all about money, they just want to get the experience. But that's another thing. Like if you are like a young person that lives at home and doesn't have, many bills, maybe you're okay starting off at like a lower salary just so you can kind of get the experience. But then as you start to gain that experience and build your resume, then you can now start requesting more. Also be cognizant of like whatever you start at a company is usually going to be kind of close to where you stay at. I say that because like your raises are going to be like incremental. Like you're only going to get like a percentage, every year, like, depending on your review, depending on how the company does it. So don't be afraid to jump insurance companies. Like I think that especially in this day and age, people aren't being loyal to companies if they're not getting like what they need out of a job, and if they're not getting the pay that they need. People are not afraid to say, okay, you know what, I can't get it here, so let me go on ahead and go over here. That's what I do. Like after a while, I make a certain amount and it's like, okay, cool. So, oh, you're only going to give me a $1,000 raise for the year. That ends up being whatever the math is. It ain't a lot per hour. So if it's some BS like that, and I know I'm putting in the time, and I speak to managers, I speak to upper management, and I'm not getting anywhere, that's when I start looking elsewhere, because what you're not going to do is have me working for free. So this is even if you're new to insurance. Like once you start getting that experience, and like after you're about a year in, I would say just kind of start paying attention to what's out there and then just see kind of how your company moves regarding raises. So just because you start at like a lower amount doesn't mean that you have to stay there. I make significantly more than what I made when I first started, but I also started, 7 years ago. So I do have some experience. So yeah, like don't be afraid again just to move companies. But I would say typically in this day and age, from what I've seen, and depending on where you live, I would say 30 to 50,000 is kind of like a reasonable start for someone who is brand new to the industry with no experience. All right, so next question is, how long do you have to be an adjuster to be able to move into different roles? Now, for the most part, most companies are going to require you to be in your role. If you're starting with a company, they're going to require you to be in that role for at least a year. Some places are 6 months, but in my experience, I've seen a year. Even with my current company, I do have the experience, like I've told you guys, but I just started back in November. So in order for me to put in for another position, talk to my manager about this, just kind of about like where I see myself, where I want to eventually go. He told me that I do need to complete that first year, and then after that, I can start kind of like applying and looking around at other positions. So that is going to be your typical time frame. Also, it's going to depend a lot on how well you do the current job. So if you are, kind of coming in like hitting the ground running and you're killing it and you're staying on top of your workload, you're going to probably be able to move a little bit quicker than someone who is kind of struggling, not really doing a good job with their workload and stuff. You're just not going to be able to make a good case for yourself. So rule of thumb, approximately 1 year, but definitely check with your company because it could be different from place to place. Next question, do you have to be licensed to be an adjuster? So depending on where you live, the answer could be yes, the answer could be no. So I'll just speak about my own experience. So truth be told, I just got licensed when I came to this job because it was a requirement. In California, you are not required to be a licensed adjuster to work on claims. Typically, the company that you work for is licensed, so you're essentially working off of their license. Now, in other states, which I believe in Texas, you do have to be a licensed adjuster. You have to be individually licensed in order to work on claims. So that's going to be a little bit different. And I think Florida is the same way. Don't quote me on that, but I think they're the same way. So yeah, the answer in my situation was no. Now, the first carrier that I worked for, I didn't have to be licensed at all. I could even actually work on Texas claims because I was working off of that company's license. But the second company I worked for, I was only able to work on California claims. They did not allow me to work on out-of-state claims because I was not licensed. And towards the end of me being there, they did want to kind of push for the employees to get licensed. And they were willing to pay for it. It was just a matter of you studying for the exam and taking the exam and passing it, kind of in your, I don't want to say your free time. They wanted you to do it like on work time, but we were so limited on time that it was kind of like, how am I supposed to do this? But yeah, so they were going to pay for it. And then the company that I work for now, we are all over. So I do have to be licensed to do this job. So they had us get licensed like in the first couple of weeks of us being there before we actually started training. So now I'm a fully licensed adjuster. But yeah, just kind of see what your state's guidelines are. They will tell you right away. And then what I can say is that most companies will pay for you to get licensed. So if you are a staff adjuster, the company that you're working for typically will sponsor you and pay for the license. The only stipulation is like you have to pass within like the first 2 tries. If you don't pass, then usually you'll have to pay for it yourself, or I don't know if they'll terminate you right away or if they give you like a certain amount of time to pass it. I don't know because I passed mine. But yeah, so something to think about. You gotta check with the company that you're working with. I don't really know how it works to get licensed on your own, if I'm completely honest, but my understanding is that even if you're an independent adjuster, I think if you're like working for an actual company, they'll assist you with getting licensed. Whether or not they pay for it, I don't know, because I've never done that role, but definitely something to look at depending on what state you live in. Okay, so the last question that I have is, what classes should you take to be an adjuster? And I'm gonna be honest, this is something that I need to research because I don't know of any like adjuster classes. If anybody else does, like definitely leave it in the comments, each one teach one, we could learn together. But I don't know of any actual classes to be an adjuster. What I do know of is just like I always tell you guys, like if you're starting with a company, you're gonna get trained on the job. Not only are they gonna have like actual training, like a formal training, but then you're going to learn on the job. A lot of it is really kind of like applying the information and just like learning with real life scenarios that you can apply to other situations. I don't know of any actual classes. Like the only classes that I know of are typically when you already are in the industry. So like they'll have different trainings on, well, obviously like you have like your mandatory trainings on like ethics and cybersecurity, Department of Insurance stuff, things like that. And then usually companies will have like separate classes for different types of situations. So property adjuster situations, auto adjuster situations, field adjuster situations, things like that. So it's usually like classes that are offered by the company that you are either assigned or you can take on your own. But I don't know of any actual classes that you would take to get into the industry. Again, I'll do some research, but I do get that question a lot. So again, my main thing with like getting into the industry is don't spend your own coin if you don't have to. I always recommend becoming a staff adjuster because a lot of the things that you would need are paid for. And I do feel like it's the best way to get like real life experience, real hands-on experience before you transfer into another type of role. Even if you want to do the independent adjuster route or the public adjuster route, I think it's good to just be working with a company, working as a staff adjuster, and then kind of branching out from there. So you can kind of get all that experience for free and then move on as you see fit. All right, you guys, so I know that was a lot. It's always a lot because I talk a lot, but that's all I got for you today. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if there are some other questions that you have that I did not answer today, feel free to leave them in the comments. I have no problem doing a part 2, 3, 4, whatever of this video. Or like I said, if it's something that's quick, I could just simply answer you in the comments. Either way, I will definitely respond back to you. I get back to everybody. And yeah, we can just go from there. So my goal is always to just share with you the information that I know firsthand. I don't know everything, but I know a lot. So if you guys want to, you know, just kind of like know some information before you get started or just about like being in the industry for some years, I'm more than happy to share with you the information that I've gained over the years. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please go on ahead and give me a big fat thumbs up. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you have not already subscribed and you made it this far, please go on ahead and click that subscribe button below. Be sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything from me. With that being said, you guys have an amazing day and I'll see you next time.
You mad, they don't salute you. I need a bag, size is super. They turned your back, it's like I never knew you. Leave that.